decades, from Maine to Florida, taxpayer billions have been spent on efforts to try to hold back the sea from rising tides and hurricanes, with questionable success. Lisa Fletcher reports from Charleston, South Carolina, on plans for and concerns about a sea change.
Hurricane Joaquin, Hurricane Matthew, and Hurricane Irma. 3 consecutive storms to hit Charleston, South Carolina. The storm surge and tidal flooding hammered the historic city. Charleston was founded in 1670 and ever since has been in a battle with the sea. I'm standing on a seawall that was built in the 19th century, and it's done a pretty good job of protecting these homes from the water. But as sea levels continue to rise and storms become more frequent, the new battle for Charleston is figuring out how to protect it as we move into the 21st century. Average high tide here is about 5.5 feet. And between 2019 and 2020, 157 tides reached flood stage of 7 feet. It took nearly 60 years prior to that for the same number of damaging tides to occur.
So this is what we call high battery.
Those projections preoccupy Winslow Hasty, president and CEO of the historic Charleston Foundation.
Our relationship to the water is sort of why we exist. It's sort of what made put Charleston on the map and made it such an important economic center for the entire South. We've always battled flooding and water, but it's just the increased intensity of the storms and the increased frequency.
Hurricanes and high tides are part of living on the coast, but the rising tides and threat level have led to a proposal by the Army Corps of Engineers to build a man-made structure in Charleston to combat Mother Nature. It's all part of the Bipartisan Budget Act of 2018, which released more than $100 million taxpayer dollars to study solutions to reduce damage caused by coastal flooding. The current strategy calls for a wall stretching around parts of the historic city's 8-mile perimeter, reaching as high as 12 feet, costing taxpayers more than $1 billion. The Army Corps experts say it would reduce flooding like this, simulated in this video, replicating a nearly 13-foot tidal surge pushed into Charleston by Hurricane Hugo in 1989. Is the community embracing this idea of a seawall?
It's really interesting, and it depends on who you talk to. A lot of people, their knee-jerk reaction is, A, this is way too expensive. How are we going to be able to accomplish this? B, we're going to neglect other areas of the city. So people that don't live on the peninsula are very concerned that we're going to eat up all our resources just protecting this.
Questions Charleston City Council member Mike Seekings is also asking.
We have a number of different needs. Do we put all our eggs in one basket and build a wall around the city, 8.7 miles long, 12 feet high, to the exclusion of other things?
Seekings represents a large portion of residents living in the city's historic district.
A couple, $3 billion for a wall that doesn't deal with sea level rise, that doesn't deal with higher tides, and that has some challenges when it comes to stormwater is something we're going to have to really weigh.
So it sounds like you're not against the broader idea of protecting the city from storm surge and sea level rise. You're just not sure this is the right plan?
Right. Is it smart? And one of the things we have to do is we have to manage water. And when you build a wall to stop water from coming in, that isn't necessarily water management. That's water retardation.
As the Army Corps nears the end of a multi-year study on flood mitigation and talking about a purchase price of $1.1 billion, with projections once as high as $3 billion with no guarantees it's going to work, Charleston residents may well have reason to question the seawall project. 2 years ago, we visited an Army Corps project in New Orleans at a cost of $14 billion. It's one of the largest public works projects in history. Because of rising seas and shrinking levees, the Army Corps now says this massive project will no longer protect the city in as few as 4 years, something Lieutenant General Honore, who managed relief efforts in the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina, told me 2 years ago. So you expect the levees to fail?
It's not if, it's when. Because they're made out of dirt and rock and concrete, and they can be overmatched either by rainfall or by water surge coming in from the Gulf.
And the price tag of any protection is growing. In the next 18 years, according to one study, protecting all coastal cities in the U.S. with seawalls would require $400 billion. Right now, Miami is considering an Army Corps project with a price tag of more than $6 billion for a 20-foot seawall cutting through one of Miami's most fashionable waterfront districts. The Army Corps declined an interview about the proposal with full measure, citing as a reason the project study is not complete. Considering seawater management projects have unreliable results, it begs the question, are they worthy of taxpayer dollars?
Number one priority for sure is public safety and making sure that we are protected, but it has to be done in a way that's realistic and that's consistent with who we are as an old and historic and very important city.
And cautions Winslow Hasty, consistent with the historic beauty of Charleston.
When you think about the Army Corps of Engineers, you don't think about aesthetics. How can you marry the two so it is functional yet doesn't distract from the things that make this such a beautiful tourist destination?
That is the key question, is how we can insert such a huge and I would argue important piece of infrastructure into a very fragile and historic sort of environment. That's sort of our role, honestly, and the role of the residents and the broader community here is to really hold the Army Corps' feet to the fire.
The next phase of the project, aesthetics. What a seawall would look like in a city that lives on her looks. That may be more important than the $400 million Charleston may have to contribute to building the wall. For Full Measure, I'm Lisa Fletcher in Charleston.